Hi, everyone. I just want to thank you all for joining us as we help kick off the 35th annual National Girls and Women's in Sports Day, which officially gets underway tomorrow. My name is Pam Flinke, and I'm an assistant commissioner with the Big East Conference. We're excited to host what should be an engaging, informative panel featuring some sports industry's leaders who have amazing backgrounds and experiences to share with you all. We encourage you to ask questions throughout tonight's panel. You can do so by sending us a message through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Without further ado, I'm happy to introduce our host for tonight's panel, Big East Commissioner Val Ackerman.
Thank you very much, Pam, and good evening, everybody. And thank you very much for joining us to help us usher in this year's National Girls and Women in Sports Day, which is actually tomorrow. But we wanted to get a head start, and hopefully this will be a tremendous event. I'm very sure it will be. As I think everybody knows, NGWS Day is a chance every year to reflect on the importance of sports in the lives of women and girls all across our country. And for people like me and my guests, my distinguished guests, to think about how far women in the sports business have come since the early days of our respective careers, and what we can do to help keep that progress going. I'll note, if no one has checked their calendar lately, that we're a year away from the 50th anniversary of Title IX, which for the students on our call was the landmark federal law that was passed in 1972 and helped open up so many opportunities for girls and women to be part of athletics competition. I can tell you that Title IX played a key role in my life as it enabled me to get a scholarship to play basketball in college. And that absolutely set the stage for my career and for my life. So I'm sure that at this time next year, many people will be looking back on the Title IX legacy. But we chose the title Next Frontier for tonight's talk because it was our desire to be forward-looking and explore what the connection between women in sports will look like in the years to come, including as we come out of the COVID era, and we will come out of the COVID era. I know that for sure. So I'm very, very excited that three women who I have tremendous regard for have made time to be with us this evening. I'm proud to call each and every one of them not only colleagues, but friends. And I know they'll have some very valuable perspectives to share with our audience. I think, ladies, the only thing that we're missing is a bottle of our favorite adult beverage. So, maybe next time we'll get that lined up as well. So by way of brief introduction, let me tell you who we have with us tonight. I'll do this in alphabetical order. Kathy Carter. Kathy, raise your hand. My dear friend currently oversees the revenue and marketing functions for Team USA and the LA 28 Olympic and Paralympic Games. So Kathy will be a key player as we look ahead to the Olympic movement and the hosting of the Olympics in the United States in 2028. Kathy has had a distinguished 30+ year career in the sports industry, and that's included high-level roles with Soccer United Marketing, AEG Major League Soccer, and the 1994 World Cup. Last but not least, Kathy was a former student athlete at the College of William and Mary. So Kath, thanks for being with us. Susan Cohig. Susan, raise your hand in the middle there on my screen, has been with the National Hockey League since 1996, where she's the Executive Vice President for Club Business Affairs. Susan works across many business areas at the league, ranging from digital media to events, finance, sales and marketing, broadcasting. She's a lawyer and collaborates closely with the legal department on a whole range of business and policy matters. And importantly, for tonight's talk, she also is spearheading, and has been for many years, the NHL's initiative around women's ice hockey, which is designed to help elevate and support the women's game by using NHL assets to spotlight the game at all levels. So Susan, thanks so much, friend, for being with us tonight. And then last but not least, my friend Terri Jackson, who has been the executive director of the Women's National Basketball Players Association since 2016. Terry's from our world. She previously worked at the NCAA National Office and as legal counsel for athletics and assistant general counsel and FOIA officer for the University of the District of Columbia. Terri has double Big East ties as an alum of Georgetown University, receiving both her Bachelor of Arts and her JD from the Hilltop. So ladies, thanks again. That doesn't do justice to all the things you've done, but at least it gives our audience a flavor of that. So let me just start. It's on me now to get some questions going for all of you. So I'm going to start now. Terri, with you as our Big East alum here with not 1, but 2 degrees from Georgetown. Can you maybe share a favorite memory or two from your days on the Hilltop? What was it like being a student there, and how has that affected your life?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say, Val, it is a pleasure to be with you and with everyone tonight. This is an awesome way to kick off National Girls and Women in Sports Day. So thank you for this. I'm proudly wearing my colors, proudly wearing Georgetown tonight, and a special memory, a favorite memory. I think that's kind of easy. It's the moment that I bumped into, or rather, he bumped into me, the young man that would ultimately become my husband, because we've been together 30 years later, and still adding to our Hoya love story, if you will. So it's the moment in which it was freshman year, just before classes started, for the Georgetown folks on the phone, right in front of Healy Circle. Yeah, he bumped into me. Make sure you tell him that.
I'm going to make it. This is being recorded, so we'll keep that for posterity. We'll keep that note. Great. Well, listen, ladies, let's start off. Thanks, Terri, for that. Let's start off just with a question about what you were thinking. Probably didn't imagine you'd be sitting in these seats today. And so my question is, when you were back in college, what were you thinking? What were your career goals back then, and how did they evolve in those first couple of years after you graduated, and maybe for your first year or two? So Kath, I'm going to start with you on that one. What were you thinking?
Well, yeah, I always look back to one of our alums who would come down and speak, and as Val mentioned, I was a student athlete, and so the athletes would come together, and one of the more famous alums, Mark Mccormick, who, for those who have heard his name, he was the original founder of IMG, which is now in its 18th iteration of names, but now part of WME and an overall conglomerate. But he started basically a sports marketing company, and he would come back, and here he was involved with golf and Arnold Palmer and so many great players. He would come back and talk to us as athletes about what was going on in sports. And of course, every single one of us sat in the audience and said, that's what I want to do. And then we promptly said, but there's no real sports industry to speak of. Yes, there are teams, but there wasn't really that much of an industry like it is today. And so for me personally, I had no concept that I had a potential to actually, as you mentioned, Val, have a 30+ year career in sport as a profession. So it was, and quite frankly, more lucky than good that I found myself on the trajectory that I did. But I remember vividly listening to Mark and saying, how in the world do you create that as an opportunity? And not a single one of us had any idea how to do it.
Great. Thanks, Kath. Susan, how about you?
Well, thanks, Val, and thanks for including me in this amazing group tonight. Really looking forward to this. Like with Kathy, when I was in college, I got a business degree because that's what you needed to do, because you think about going into business. When I was growing up in Denver and went to the University of Denver, at that time, it really, as Kathy says, there was never a thought that sports was a business to work in. And at the time, I went really a different direction in that I loved music, and I kept thinking, I want a job doing something in an area that I love. And so music for me at the time was the focus. And so at that time it was getting into radio. And even then, I didn't even think about getting into radio as you could go work and actually get paid if you weren't on air or if you weren't a musician. But I stumbled into an opportunity in the marketing department of a local radio station. And through that, ended up running the marketing department for a family of radio stations and got to know the Denver Nuggets. And that was really my first foray into connecting, engaging with our listeners and sports fans, and that there was a whole community that you could engage in, and that there was actually a business to it. So it is sort of that combination of getting lucky and being there, and then using the business skills that I had learned when I went to college, and they all connected, and I ended up at the Denver Nuggets.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Terri, how about you?
You know, so growing up, my dad was an attorney, and I used to go to work with him and, you know, see him in action in court. And so I knew that I always wanted to be a lawyer. I knew I was always going to go to law school. Throughout high school, I'll just take it back a little further. Going through high school, I would have been the one who would have said, I want to be the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. Like, that was my goal. I get to college and I probably scaled it back a little bit from the Supremes back to, well, I just want to be a badass rock star, you know, partner in a big law firm. And, you know, and so that was the goal. I got out of law school and I loved my clerkship. And I went to work for a firm, and I tell you, I probably couldn't get away from the firm life fast enough, quite honestly. So I was lucky enough to do some research on Title IX and really started learning more about the regs and learning more about the cases. And before I knew it, I was putting a class together on women in sport. And so that's how it kind of started for me. I was kind of going in one direction, and recognized pretty quickly that was not the direction for me. And I'm so happy, so happy.
Well, you know, I shared a similar experience working at a big firm. I don't think I would have gotten my next job without that experience, but you know pretty quickly when you're in certain environments what you think is right for you. Let me ask the younger self question to all of you. Would any of you have done anything different if you knew then what you know now? I'll just mention I had a chance to get a JD MBA. Decided not to. My law school offered 2 degrees in 4 years instead of the 3 and 2 in 5. And I just wanted to keep going. But I wish, you know, I say to young people all the time, I think those extra degrees certainly can't hurt down the road. And I kind of wish I'd gotten mine back then, but did okay, I guess, without it. But any of you have any regrets on things you did early that you might have changed if you knew then what you know now?
You know, I for one, I'm not wired to look back as much as I am to look forward. So gosh, yeah, I mean, there's 50 million things I'd probably do different in the moment, but on average and on the whole, I'd say, I have learned through all my mistakes, let's say, and been able to sort of parlay those, I think, into future. I think the one thing I would say, whether it was by luck or by design, I never turned down a risk. And by that, I mean, I did a lot of things that didn't seem on paper to actually pencil out. And so for me, taking those chances, actually, you know, great chances are great rewards. And I think I'm probably sitting here today because I didn't turn down, like Terri was saying, the opportunity to leave the law or leave the big firm and go chase some other dream, and you never know where it's going to take you. I think that's the one thing I'm happy with, never turning down that opportunity.
Great, thanks. Susan?
I think I can't say there is anything I regret, but one of the things that the hindsight of experience and as time passes is I probably would have liked to have been more intentional about saying, what do I want? And then going and finding it earlier in my career. And I think this might have been a function of when you're starting in your career. And I talk to a lot of women where in a way you are looking for people to recognize your skills and to promote you, and you know where you think about what that path is. And now I think I wish I had been more directed to say, what do I want and how do I go and find it? I really admire people who have a vision and don't let hurdles stand in the way, or they don't wait for people to help them. And I think early on, probably I was looking more for that affirmation and for my supervisors or those opportunities to come to me than me actively going out and finding them.
Thanks, Susan. Terri?
I kind of echo Susan and Kathy's comments and their reflections. I think I don't look back either. I don't want to do that. I think with every experience, I've learned something, and there's something that has propelled and led me to where I am today. So no, I don't think I'd do anything differently, but I would say I'd get comfortable with the zigzag in the career, because I think I was kind of wired or programmed to think that my career had to have a certain linear trajectory, and kind of get caught up in titles and positions. And I think once I got comfortable saying, no, I'm going to go, like Kathy says, take a risk. I'm going to go and try this. And then I'm going to go do this. And all of that has just added to my experiences. I remember my parents thought I was crazy when I left the firm and said, you know what, I'm leaving this big firm and we're going to New Orleans and we're going to start a foundation. And they're like, you're going to do what? And I said, yeah, we've got this plan. We've been talking about it. It was a group of friends. I said, yeah, we've got this really good idea to start this nonprofit in New Orleans, and we're just gonna up and move, and we're headed down there. And they're like, what are you doing for jobs? What are you doing? And I said, no, it's gonna be fine. It's gonna work out. And sure enough, it did. We learned how to write grants. By the end of the year, we had a pot of money. And by that next summer, we were off and running, and a foundation that supported inner city kids in New Orleans. And their families. And it was amazing. And you talk about, you don't leave a job until you have a job. Well, that's what I did. It's taking a risk. And we just made it work.
Well, that's a great theme. And we've already got our first question in. So let me maybe paraphrase it a little bit. The question is, how would you compare your experience coming up in the sports business with what young women today who are just beginning their careers are seeing? I mean, my observation is there's a lot more women in the business, which is a plus, but in terms of their experience getting in the door, how would you compare what happened to you, and what advice might you give to these young women who are just starting out? Maybe start with you, Kathy.
Well, I go back to there are a lot more women in the business, and there is a much bigger business today than there was certainly when we were starting out. So that means there are more opportunities. I think that we as young women are starting, and certainly I've seen this through the trajectory, and I'm certain you guys have seen it as well. We've gotten a whole heck of a lot better during our career of networking. And I'd say that young women today, I think my hope is that you're starting to understand and start to value the relationships that you're building, be that whether as student athletes, as students, as members of a college or university. Those are friends and people that become, as are friends from life that help you. And learning to network is something that certainly for us was a learned behavior that and certainly happened, I think, through our careers more so than it was at a very early age, even though I didn't realize it, but networking was actually how I got into the jobs. I just didn't realize it. But to me, there's no dirty secret on that. Who you know opens the door. What you do once the door is open is up to you. And I think that's something that I think young women today have a much better understanding of.
Yeah, it's great advice. Let me switch gears a little bit and ask each of you if you have a core leadership mantra or tenet that, sort of you look to, or that helps guide you either when you're trying to make a tough decision or when you need a little extra motivation in the morning. Anything come to mind? Susan, maybe start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think for all of us, particularly when you work in sports, you can be, I think, most successful, and I look even to the leaders that I look to, is roll up your sleeves and understand every part of the business, and don't be afraid of the work, because one, that teaches you how you can have other people around you and add to what your skill gaps are. But it's also, when you're a leader, you want to make sure you can show the people that you're leading that you're not afraid to get in the mix and do the work and understand, ask questions when you don't know something. There's not there's not a downside to admitting you don't know something. And I think, even getting to the question that Kathy just answered, I am so amazed by the fearlessness and intelligence of women that I see coming into sports. And I feel like I learn every day from that. And I think good leaders need to listen and understand you don't come to the table knowing everything. And you also can't sit back and expect everybody else to do all the work, because it's a collaboration. That's one of the things I love about sports. It's a team sport, whether it's on the ice, but also off the ice. And that's something I think is important for leadership in any sport.
Yeah, I think leading by example. Terri, how about you?
Sure. I stole this from former Secretary Albright. She has this saying that I don't know that she uses so much anymore, but I definitely use it. I think about it almost every single day. There's a special place in, where for women who don't help other women. I know we're recording this, so you don't have to bleep me out. I won't say the whole thing, but I think we all know the saying. There's a special place in for women who don't help other women. And I think about that, and I'm really intentional about that. And kind of like Susan said, going back to the question that Kathy just answered about women in sports and what we can do and how we can help each other. I just believe in that. I believe in that to my core. I believe that is my responsibility. I'm excited by it. I talk about being prepared, preparation, look to be the smartest in the room. And when you get in the room and you're at the table, celebrate that moment because you made it, but also recognize that you have a responsibility to make sure that your sisters are right there with you. So that drives me. We did a big deal recently. And there were so many women at the table, and I was so proud of that. And I shared that with them. So that's what drives me. What drives me is to be the best that I can and to bring others along with me, particularly those who look like me and perhaps may have not had that advantage or that opportunity before. That's my responsibility. So that's what drives me every day.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Terri. Kath, how about you?
I think I'll keep mine pretty short and sweet. I think I am constantly looking for the razor's edge between patience and impatience. As a leader with a deadline of 2028 on my head and on our head, finding that we're giving time, but also finding where do you need to push. And that's, in my mind, is a total razor's edge. That to me is finding the balance is the mark of I think, a strong leader.
Thanks, Kath. Let's flip just for the moment to the pandemic. All of us have been touched each in our way about the impact on not only our businesses, but our lives. And I guess this is a broad-based question, but I'll just ask each of you from where you're sitting and as it relates to the organizations that you're leading, helping lead. Where do we go with this? How do you think the aftermath of COVID will affect our business? Will there be changes? What things will turn out to be timeless from our pre-COVID days? And then, think a bit about how it might affect women's sports in particular. So it's a big, broad question, but sort of your thoughts about where we go from here post-COVID. So Terri, maybe I'll start with you on this one.
Sure. We're in a moment right now where everything, not just sports, where everything has been turned on its head, right? It's the world is kind of flipped upside down. And yet, after a record-breaking year of incredible television ratings, merchandise sales, just seeing what the players did off the court in the WNBPA with voter registration drives and getting folks aware about the census and like all the stuff that they were doing. It's amazing. I have to keep reminding myself they pulled all of that off. All of that happened in this massive global health crisis that we're experiencing, like during a pandemic. We're in a world right now where we were forced to see how creative you can be, how nimble you can be, how agile you can be. And I have to sit back and think, you know what, that's what we've been doing in women's sports for a long time. Like, that's how we operate. We look to be as creative and quick thinking. And so we kind of got in a sweet spot here. So once you put us on television, yeah, once you give people the opportunity to see us, we're going to blow, the ratings off the charts. And, I got to chuckle at sometimes when I would hear, some of the executives in the men's leagues kind of complaining, oh, our ratings are down, because we're competing against everybody else. And I'm like, hey, that's been us all along. That's been the W. Val, that's been the W. This is, we've been competing too, and yet we found a way to emerge and just do it really, really well. And I'll just take it back, from the success of the 2020 CBA, that put us on the map, and the social justice season that we just had allowed us to put a stake in the ground and say, not only, are we on the map, but we're here and we're here to stay. So I think we're in the midst of a crisis, and I know there's, tremendous suffering, and folks are looking to do things differently. But I think we found a way, we collectively, women's sports, found a way to thrive. And I believe it's just going to continue, quite honestly.
Great. Yep. You've tremendous opportunity taken advantage of. Susan, how about you?
Well, I think in looking at what we've all had to do to pivot in this environment that we're all in, navigating, trying to get through this health crisis and all the things everyone's contending with, I think it's really made everyone really think differently about their business. We had to pivot, and in the NHL, look at and figure out a way to finish our season, finish it in a bubble, continue to engage our fans, and continue to do all the things we do as a part of our communities in which all our fans are. I think what I'd love to see, and there is some of it that's really being forced by our fans, everybody is really re-looking at how they engage in the world, whether it's in their personal lives, whether it's in their own professions, whether it's how do they follow their teams and their favorite athletes. And it's forced a lot of innovation that probably was not happening as quickly as it needed to be in terms of how you connect and engage with fans. And it's going to change. And coming out of this, I hope that some of what we're doing now out of necessity becomes the innovations that we want to make sure live beyond this. And I think even if we don't look at it that way, our fans are going to force that. In terms of engagement, we found that our fans don't, we want them in our buildings again, because that's such a vibrant experience as a sports fan to be able to watch games live. But we've also seen that our fans are as committed to their favorite teams. They want content, they want engagement, they want to get involved with their athletes, and you don't have to be in our buildings to do that. Pivoting a little bit to the question about what does it mean for women's sports, it's one area where I want to be optimistic, but it quite frankly concerns me, because when you think about the economic environment that we're in, and industries and businesses and consumers are going to be looking at and having to try and pivot as we look at trying to bring the economy back. Historically, women's sports has always suffered. And, with the strides that have been made over the years in investment, whether it's by sponsors and networks and others, what I am concerned about is that women's sports goes backwards just because people are reordering how they're spending their dollars, and women's sports will pay a price for that. And that concerns me.
Yep, there's some challenges that are looming potentially for sure. Kath, how about you as you think about the Olympics this summer, the movement, the effects on, Susan noted, fans, engagement, et cetera? What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, first of all, we need sports. I think we need it as people. We need it to develop the next generation of leaders. I think that I've never been as committed as I am now to the value of sport to our society. As Terri was saying, for our athletes to actually show us the way to have dialogue and to create change. I mean, there's just been so many positives in my mind, yet still challenges as it relates specific to the Olympics and Paralympics. I think, I think it's going to, I truly believe that Tokyo will be the show, will showcase the value of the human spirit and what the athletes have had to do to actually be in a position to compete at a world-class level in the way that they will across a variety of different sports where perhaps they don't have the resources, whether that be women's sport or non-traditional or smaller sports that don't quite have the backing of some of the larger. I think that's something that I think as we head into Tokyo, and certainly the Paralympians at a whole nother level, I think that the showcase of the human spirit will sort of be the culmination of what we experienced at the beginning of the pandemic, where our frontline workers who were truly showing us the way, our healthcare workers, whether it was people that were delivering packages and groceries and all of the rest of it. I think our athletes are no different. And what they did in the requisite bubbles for all the professional leagues, and ultimately what I think they will have had to endure from a global perspective and for us as Americans, will showcase itself in Tokyo in a way that I think will, I hope, be the moment we realize the future is now upon us.
Thanks, Kathy. Let me just pick up a bit on the women's sports piece at this point. And Terri, you alluded to, the breakout, if you will, the great things that happened with the WNBA last summer. Whatever challenges loom, we've all seen the amazing growth over the last 25 or 30 or 50 years. So you've all seen that. And I guess, my question is, putting COVID aside, okay, and the challenges that may be presenting, what do you all think is going to be what we're going to need or we're going to have to see in order for the fan support that we know women's sports need to keep going and to keep growing? And so, Susan, maybe I'm going to start with you on this one, and I want you to key it back to your work, important work that you're doing at the NHL to help support women's ice hockey. There's a little bit of history here, as you and I know well.
Yes.
With the groundwork that's been laid and some of the interesting things that have been happening, not only with the national team, but with some of the pro women's hockey endeavors. And so maybe you could share with the audience a little bit what the NHL is thinking about with women's hockey as it incorporates it into a broader business strategy.
Absolutely. And Val is, she's being very humble in terms of this because she's been instrumental in helping us really think about how we look at girls and women's hockey and what it means for that trajectory to the highest levels of play, given the history of the WNBA and the work and the amazing league that is there today. And Terri, what you were talking about and the activism and everything that has happened over the last 6 to 9 months in the world of COVID. I think for us, and looking at what is really important, the business imperative for us from an NHL standpoint is twofold. One, getting more girls and boys playing hockey and growing that fan base. We want a diverse and vibrant fan base, and it's starting at the most grassroots level. Pre-COVID, the biggest growth area in all of kids' sports was girls playing hockey 8 and under. So there's a tremendous growth and trajectory for it, but the pipeline isn't there enough yet for what needs to be that robust level at the highest levels that we see now with the WNBA. And it's a priority for us from an NHL standpoint to help and contribute, and as the leaders in the sport, make sure that happens. So when it's learn to play programs, grassroots hockey, supporting hockey at all levels, and then working closely with, the NGBs, whether it's USA Hockey, Hockey Canada, IIHF, to make sure that as girls are continuing to play, they have places to play, because that's the biggest challenge when you look at growing up and you're in your teens and going into college programs, it isn't robust enough. And we need to support that. So all the work we're doing and looking at how can we use our platforms to create a forum and a place for girls to see women playing. And that old adage, if you can see it, you can be it. We want to use our NHL platforms for that. So not only programming on all of our digital platforms, social media, making sure we're highlighting these athletes, but even with our own events. It was a year ago, last weekend, All-Star, where we hosted the elite women's 3-on-3 at our All-Star game in St. Louis, where we had 2 teams made up of the top players in the United States and Canada playing on NHL ice, the women wearing NHL jerseys, where we can make sure we're always highlighting them at NHL events, showing, whether it's the, World Championships on NHL Network and others, creating that platform. And right now, Val, you mentioned professional women's hockey. There are two groups. There's the NWHL that many of you may be familiar with, who is, in the middle of their own bubble right now and playing for their championship. And then the PWHPA, which is a group of the best players in the world that are really banded together to say, we need something that becomes a long-term solution for women playing hockey. And we support all of that to really make sure that we can find a path forward that's going to make sense so that we're supporting it at every level.
Great. Thanks, Susan. Kath, maybe I'll throw to you to maybe say a few words about what's happened in women's soccer. Since your playing days at William and Mary, you've been vitally involved in many levels of the game through your work at MLS and SUM and the interactions you've had with the national team program. What's in your crystal ball as you think about where that sport is going after such a great run over the last 10 years or so?
Yeah, and it's been a long time coming, right? I mean, you think about 1991, our women's national team went to China and very few people even knew they were playing, let alone there was a national team and let alone that they won what at the time was the World Championship. Fast forward to France now 2 summers ago, and our women just did a remarkable job of winning their second consecutive World Cup titles. So, I think soccer from a global perspective has arrived from the women's side of the equation, and it's actually in that competition that I think is going to drive even further growth. We're on our 3rd league, although this NWSL has survived far longer than its 2 predecessors. And I think certainly as it relates to soccer, there truly is an opportunity for, I think, fans of the game to recognize quality, talent, and excellence. And we've seen that certainly at the national team level, that the fandom for our U.S. women is on par in a lot of cases with the men. And so I think that there is this, and certainly the next generation of fans, I don't think we'll see male or female, they'll just see quality. And so part of what needs to happen in my mind for women's sport is to hold on and just keep chopping wood, because it's hard to start a league. It's hard to keep going. What you guys have done with the W is quite remarkable 25 years later. So soccer, I think, is well on its way, women's soccer in particular, certainly from a US perspective, but even perhaps more importantly, and Val, you and I've had this conversation for many, many years, the difference between soccer and basketball. And I said, then, and I say now, you have to tune in our US women's national team. They could lose because the rest of the world from a quality perspective has just put so many resources in women's soccer. And we're seeing that around the world in terms of fandom and people are showing up to games. So I think the future is bright. I mean, I think it's going to be complicated because it's never easy sailing, as they say, but I'm very, very optimistic about the future of women's soccer.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Terri, let's turn to you. Just thoughts you have as the WNBA goes into its 25th season next year, coming off the momentum of this past year. You talked earlier about the role that activism played last summer. I guess, I'd be interested in getting your thoughts on what's next on that front, and just in general as the league collaborates with its players to figure out how to take things to an even higher level. What's top of mind for you as you think about activism, marketing strategies, and future fan growth?
Wow, that's quite a question. That's quite a question.
I know you can answer it. I know you have the answers.
Yeah. As I think about what's next for us, and Val, you and I've had this conversation, and we've had it across our entire basketball ecosystem. When I think about what's next, what I think is important is that there's a better connection or connectivity across the entire ecosystem. I think sometimes we kind of get in the little silos of what it means to be women's basketball. And I don't know how Susan and Kathy might feel with respect to soccer or hockey, but I think there's such an opportunity, particularly growing the fan base and getting that media attention when you share that spotlight with the AAU, the grassroots programs, with the high school, but particularly the collegiate programs, and then seeing these women as they rise up and join the professional ranks of the W. So I'm so excited about the opportunities there for the conversations, Val, that you have started, and looking to connect these groups up, because I believe that has to happen for us to grow. That's just, I mean, there's such a loyal fan base there. And it's just remarkable that we haven't taken advantage of it like we really need to until now, and the group that you've put together, Val. When I think about also what's next with activism, it's honoring, it's an opportunity for the league and us from the Players Association side to recognize and honor who these women are. And they have said so many times, it is in our DNA. If you are Black, brown, white, if you are straight, a member of the LGBTQ community, an ally of that community, you recognize that you're, what it means to be an advocate, and activism is a part of your everyday experience. And so for the women of the W to have showcased this, to be able to show the world who they are on the court and the performance on the court. And when you take off that jersey, the opportunities to use your platforms in ways that are just amazing. If we honor that, we will take this to new heights. There are so many. So why I might be a little more optimistic like Kathy, and thinking about what's next for women's sports, there's partners who are coming to the table who are looking to do just that, honor the activism and honor who these women are, and look to connect with them and tell the stories about them. So I'm very, very hopeful for what is next. I know that there is work to be done, for sure. But I'm hopeful for it, because I think we all are now paying attention to it, and we're so open to it. So those are my thoughts. That's what's next, I think, for us.
That's it. That's it. So let me ask each of you, maybe we have a bunch of questions that have come in, so I'll sort of try to do some quick hitters here. Kath, I'll start with you. How do you navigate working in a traditionally male-driven industry?
Well, I don't know. It's always, you kind of survive in the industry however you can. And I think Susan and I would certainly, I think, Terri, we've got you by a couple of years, but Val, you're the same way. We didn't know any different. So we just kept our head down and just kept working really hard. I think Susan said it early on. Don't be afraid of the work. I think Terri said it as well in a different context. But at the early times, I thought, oh, gosh, I'm doing all the work, and I realized that's actually that was like our superpower. And when I originally thought that was a real pain, now I realize, gosh, no, that actually got me more opportunity. So I don't know. You just keep your head down, keep your feet moving.
Good advice. Susan, here's one for you. What are the biggest challenges, obstacles in the way of getting more women's sports at the forefront of the primetime media and airtime on networks during primetime sports shows? Will we see at some point some sports shows that exclusively cover women's sports? What can the average collegiate coach or player to affect real change in growing coverage? Any
No,
thoughts?
it's a great question. And I think it's a challenge that women's sports has generally, because there's a perception that women's sports won't be interesting for a broadcast viewing audience. And that couldn't be farther from the truth. You know, people want to watch compelling games, whether it's basketball, soccer, hockey, and these are amazing athletes. I think one of the things, though, that is really important is thinking in terms of sports now and not necessarily being wedded to the notion of a traditional model, whether it's a traditional league model where you have to have X numbers of games over X numbers of weeks, or even traditional programming model to have on whether it's cable or otherwise. I think it's really finding those creative outlets, whether it's streaming and other ways, because fans will find you. And it's just being accessible and having that programming and you know, starting out with traditional media people, getting over that idea that people don't want to watch women athletes, because that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Can I add on to that a little bit, Val? Because I would say it's going to change. I agree with Susan. I there's going to be change. We're going to be looking at different platforms, but the opportunity for us to be at the table is what's going to help that change, right? The opportunity for there to be more women that look like Terri and Susan and Kathy and Val, others who are watching this at the table, making those decisions is absolutely critical to this. And it's also critical that you as fans of the game, soccer, basketball, hockey, whatever it is, that you let those networks know that you're watching and that this is important to you. I think now more than ever, there are businesses that are going to be paying attention to their consumers, and there are consumers who are at home and who have a little bit more time on their hands to write those, write those letters, write those emails, send those tweets. Tweets are powerful. Because I think when that happens, when they hear from us, when they hear from you, they will begin to see things differently. And when there's more of us at the table supporting each other, we will start making different decisions also.
Thanks, Terri. Kath, any thoughts from you on that one? On coverage?
I think they've covered it. I just think that the media is upside down. But the younger consumption is still at a rapid pace. It just doesn't conform to the viewing that we all used to experience, which was destination viewing on Sunday afternoon to watch an NFL game. And the consumption patterns are different. And I think women's sport has the potential to lean into that, to gain more foothold of the fan base. And look, having really cut my teeth in an up and coming sport, not dissimilar to what Terri's been talking about with the W. I mean, you got to fight for everything. And I think that's the world we live in today. You got to break through and actually to gain awareness. I think women's sport, it will be certainly able to do that more effectively because it's scrappier, hungrier, willing to try some things that perhaps our more traditional men's sport, and I use that in quotation marks, may not feel that they have to do.
Thanks, Kath. So we've got a question here. We all know the overwhelming benefits to girls who participate in sports. What are your thoughts and what actions do you think are needed in order to spur the continued growth of girls and women in sports at the high school and collegiate level? So maybe Terri, just think about that, put your NCA hat back on for a moment there and think about whatever conversations you're part of as it relates to grassroots girls basketball. Susan, you talked about the importance of youth hockey and what needs to be done there to get the number of girls who are playing hockey growing. And Kath, of course, you're at the front lines now with the Olympic effort. Maybe I'll just sort of go back to you to start on the importance of Olympic sport competition at the collegiate level, both as a feeder into the Olympic movement, but also for all the life skills training that it's providing to these future women leaders. What are your any thoughts?
No, I think, and I mentioned it earlier when I said we need sport, not just for entertainment and for escape, but also for the development of future leaders. And I mean that on both in its totality, but certainly I think women benefit a lot from that, as evidenced by all of the studies. I think we've got to do a lot to keep kids in sport, but it's more about reducing the barriers of entry. And sport has, at a very grassroots level, has become what should be easy and should be inexpensive has actually become very expensive. And so, just as an example, using the LA 28 platform, we've been very focused on how do we actually reduce the barrier of entry for kids in Los Angeles who may not, and that's the economic barrier. And so we're contributing $160 million to help kids actually reduce the fees for them to play through Rexham Park, with the idea being that it's the pathway for a healthier life and for opportunity you can draw that back to a kid's participation in sport. I think Terri mentioned she had been in that New Orleans as well from a philanthropic perspective in an earlier conversation we were having. But I think, anything we can do to get kids in and continue them on the trajectory, clearly then from a collegiate perspective, there's a whole lot of opportunity, but we've got to keep sport moving at a collegiate level in support of, certainly selfishly, Olympic sports, because that's the main feeder for so many of our Olympians and aspiring Olympians. So it's a critical pathway, something that's really important for all of us. And I think we're all looking at it and saying, how do we actually continue to make sure that the funding and the opportunities are all there?
Great, thanks. Terri, any thoughts from you on sort of the grassroots pipeline?
Yeah, I agree. I think we need more resources at the grassroots level. I'd like to see more of a spotlight also on our girls' grassroots programs, on the AAU programs, as compared to the guys. And I'm the mother of a young man, and so watching his career, he's now a professional basketball player, but watching his career going through high school was very different. The advantages that his grassroots basketball team had were tremendous in comparison to what you saw for girls programs, and that we've got to do something about that. We've got to hold the folks who have these teams and the shoe companies that back these teams. We've got to kind of hold them accountable and again put a spotlight on this and say we actually need you to do better. We need you to do better for the girls. So I'd like to see that. I'd also like to see more intentional diversity and inclusion policies and efforts, because I think we need to see. I don't know if it was Susan or Kathy who said, if you see it, then you want to be it, right? And so I think there needs to be more women of color in coaching opportunities, so that these young girls can see all that there is to sport and all the advantages to sport. We don't see that quite enough, and I'd like to see that at the grassroots level, all the way up to the professional level, quite honestly.
Actually, can I jump on a point Terri just made about coaching, which, we talk a lot about participation, but really, if we want to see continued evolution, it would be having more women, whether it be women or women of color, you name it. We just need more representation of women at the coaching levels, certainly at the NCAA level. I think we've seen, as Title IX had an adverse impact on women coaches, and if we can continue to build that pipeline, to me, that resonates really, really large. I always call back to women coaches, which I didn't have a lot growing up, but those that I did have left a far greater impact on me as a player, and then ultimately as a person. That I think that's an area of real opportunity for us.
Absolutely.
Susan, any thoughts from you on this one?
Well, I think one of the things that has really struck me in the work that we do with women's hockey, particularly the players that we're involved with at the elite level, is their commitment to the next generation. And, in the NHL, particularly when you have men who play hockey and their time and their commitment and their accessibility isn't as always available, given their schedule commitments, having these elite women giving of their time and engagement in all of our communities, for that next generation. And I think that's one of the things that has really contributed to the growth of girls hockey, because they're able to see these women that are role models for them. I think Kathy said it, it's a complicated situation when she was referring to women's soccer. It's the same for hockey, but every opportunity to be able to see these elite players on the ice with little girls and boys and showing them what it means to be the best in the world is an incredible thing and a great opportunity for the women that are playing at the highest levels right now. And for us, as we're continuing to build those players for the long term.
Yeah, makes sense. So I have one last quick hitter for all of you, because I'm being told by my staff we're nearing the end here. So we can end this on a relaxing note. We all work hard. We all need to recharge our batteries. So I'm going to ask each of you, what's your favorite winding down activity after the end of a long day, or you just made a hard decision? Is there one thing you do just to kind of chill? So let me see. Terri, I'm going to start with you.
Sure. I love to journal. I used to write extensively. I don't do that so much anymore. I don't force myself to take the time. But after a long day, after perhaps a hard decision, a great cold adult beverage, and the opportunity to kind of reflect on the day and think kind of what's next, it forces me or allows me to be more of a leader who's a strategic thinker. And so I really value the opportunities that I can journal with or without an adult beverage.
Great one. All right, Kath, next to you.
Yeah, so I will definitely say yes to the adult beverage, but I start every day off with a workout because that is actually like meditation for me, and it's the best. And I should say not every day, but most days. So that's an incredibly important way to start the day because it grounds me. And truthfully, I have refound a passion now, where I've created a passion, however you want to look at it. I'm COVID cooking like crazy, and I've really enjoyed the creative aspect of that, which is in some cases very different to what I might be doing on a daily basis around making decisions and having the hard. There's something very therapeutic about having my adult beverage plus a knife in my hand where I'm chopping. That's really been great.
That sounds very symbolic. Yes, ma'am. All right, Susan, I'll give you the last word on this one.
All right, two things. One, I run, and that's my stress. That's my kind of meditative, get it out of my system. And then I have a combination, a little bit COVID cooking, but my getting away from it is actually spending time with my daughter, and we are COVID cooking together. In fact, she's in there COVID cooking dinner tonight, because for spending more time, it's been such a blessing in this window of COVID world, because it kind of inspires me and reorients me in terms of what the next generation, the girls that are going to be taking over for all of us. And with the activism that we saw in the spring and the summer, and what we see with girls and young women now, it just honestly, it gives me hope. And so when I see that through the eyes of my daughter, she's a teenager, so she's a pistol, but at the same time, it's just a reminder of why I do what I do. So it's kind of a combination, but COVID cooking with Caitlin, there's probably a show we should do on YouTube with that one.
It has a show written all over it for sure. Well, listen, ladies, thank you so much. We're winding down. I just want to say how much we appreciate your taking the time, cutting into part of your dinner hours to be with us tonight. I'm sure our audience learned a lot, and I know that they can see why I have such high regard for all of you. So again, thank you all from the bottom of my heart. And I think we have some closing words. Maybe Pam, is it you that's going to come back and just tie a bow around this? So thanks again, everybody, for being with us tonight. Pam?
Thanks, Val. Yes, just to echo Val, thank you all for taking your time. We all know you have really busy schedules, and to hear these experiences and thoughts, I found really meaningful. Thanks to all our attendees for logging in tonight. If anyone would like to go back and watch tonight's session or share it with someone who you think might enjoy it, we'll be posting it to our website and to our YouTube page shortly. Thanks again, everyone, and happy National Girls and Women in Sports Day.
Thanks, everybody.